Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Now this is the second talk from the book Cittaviveka. So these are continuing the talks from the first volume of Ajahn Sumedho's collected teachings, and this is called Skillful Means Letting Go. We have been discussing the first noble truth, suffering, which becomes increasingly apparent as you sit here contemplating your own body and mind. Just be aware of what happens. You can see that when good thoughts or physical pleasure pass by, there's happiness, and when there's pain or negativity, there's aversion. Thus we can see that we habitually try to attain and maintain or get rid of conditions. The second noble truth is being aware of the arising of the three kinds of desire that we have: for sense pleasure, for becoming, or for getting rid of something, and how they arise according to conditions. Penetration of the third noble truth means seeing how what arises ceases. We become aware of the cessation, the letting go, and thus develop the fourth noble truth, the truth of the Eightfold Path: right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. In other words, the path of awareness. To be aware, we have to use skillful means, because at first we're mystified. We tend to develop a conception of awareness and try to become aware, thinking it's something that we have to get, attain, or try to develop. But this very intention, this very conceptualization, makes us heedless. We keep trying to become mindful rather than just being aware of the mind as it tries to become and tries to attain, following the three kinds of desire that cause us suffering. The practice of letting go is very effective for minds obsessed by compulsive thinking. You simplify your meditation practice down to just 2 words: letting go. Rather than trying to develop this practice and then that practice, achieve this, go into that, and understand this, read the suttas, study the Abhidhamma, learn Pali and Sanskrit, study the Madhyamaka and the Prajnaparamita, take initiations and go forth in the Theravada, Mahayana and Vajrayana traditions, write books and become a world-renowned authority on Buddhism. Instead of becoming the world's leading expert on Buddhism and being invited to great international Buddhist conferences, just let go, let go, let go. I did nothing but that for about 2 years. Every time I tried to understand or figure things out, I'd say, let go, until the desire faded out. So I'm making it very simple for you, to save you from getting caught in huge amounts of suffering. You might have the desire to become the Buddha of the age, Maitreya, radiating love throughout the world, but instead I suggest just being an earthworm. Letting go of any such desire. Just be an earthworm who knows only 2 words: let go. The important thing in meditation is to be constant and resolute in the practice, determined to be enlightened. This is not to be conceited or foolish, but to be resolute even when the going is rough. Remind yourself of Buddha Dhamma Sangha and stay with the practice. Let go of despair, anguish, pain, doubt, and of everything that arises and passes to which we habitually cling, and with which we identify. Keep this letting go as a constant refrain in your mind, so it pops up on its own no matter where you are. At first we may become obsessed with it, because our minds are normally used to being obsessed with all kinds of useless things. Worries about this and that, doubt, anger, vindictiveness, jealousy, fear, dullness and stupidity of various kinds. We have obsessive minds, obsessed with things that cause us pain and lead us into difficulties in life. Our society has taught us how to fill up the mind, how to jam it full of ideas, prejudices, regrets, anticipations and expectations. Look at bookstores, filled with all the information you could possibly want to know, published in very nice bindings with pictures and illustrations. Or we can fill our minds by watching TV, going to the cinema or reading the newspapers. These are good means of filling your mind. But look at what's printed in the media. They appeal to people's lower instincts and drives. They're full of violence, wars, corruption and perversities, and gossip. All this has its effect on the mind, because as long as our minds are obsessed with facts, symbols and conventions, if we stuff any more into them, they become jam-packed full and we go crazy. So we have to go get drunk or go wild in order to let go of the pressure. It's a cycle of madness. When we don't understand the nature of things, we're very suggestible. You see in our society how suggestion works on teenagers. Now it's the punk rock generation. Everybody in that generation thinks of themselves as punks and acts like it. Fashions are all suggestion. Women are only considered beautiful if they're dressed in a certain way. Movies suggest all kinds of delights to the senses, and we think maybe we should try them. Maybe we're missing something if we aren't experiencing them. Nobody knows what is beautiful or ugly anymore. If somebody says that immorality is morality, and you're suggestible, you may believe that. Even if you don't believe it at first, it begins to work on your mind, so you start thinking, maybe it is that way. Maybe immorality is morality, and morality is immorality. We feel obliged to know all kinds of things, to understand them and try to convince others about them. You hear my talks, you read books, and you want to tell others about Buddhism. You might even feel a bit evangelical after a retreat. But keep letting go of even the desire to tell others about it. When we feel enthusiastic, we begin to impose our enthusiasms on other people. But in meditation, we let go of the desire to influence others until the right time comes. Then it happens naturally, rather than as an aggressive action. So you do the things that need to be done, and you let go. When people tell you should read this book and that book, take this course and that course, study Pali or the Abhidhamma, go into the history of Buddhism, Buddhist logic, etc., tell yourself, let go, let go, let go. If you fill your mind with concepts and opinions as an end in itself, you aren't learning the most important thing. Ideas that you aren't able to apply to practice just clog your awareness and reduce your confidence in the practice. You just have more stuff to speculate over. It's only through learning how to empty the mind out that you can fill it with things of value, and learn how to empty a mind of its clutter. Learning how to empty a mind of its clutter takes a great deal of wisdom. Here in this meditation retreat, I'm giving you suggestions for skillful means. The obsession of letting go is a skillful one. As you repeat this phrase over and over, whenever a thought arises, you're aware of its arising. You keep letting go of whatever arises. But if the thought doesn't go, don't try to force it. This letting go practice is a way of clearing the mind of its obsessions and negativity. Use it gently, but with resolution. Meditation is a skillful letting go, deliberately emptying out the mind so we can see its purity, cleaning the mind out so that we can put the right things in. You respect your mind, so you become more careful about what you put into it. If you have a nice house, you don't go out and pick up all the filth from the street and bring it in. You bring in things that will enhance it and make it a refreshing and delightful place. If you're going to identify with anything, don't identify with mortal conditions. See what identification is. Investigate your own mind to see the nature of thought and memory, sense consciousness and feeling clearly as impermanent conditions. Bring your awareness to the slower things, to the transience of bodily sensation. Investigate pain and see it as a moving energy, a changing condition. When you're in pain, emotionally, it seems permanent, but that's just an illusion of the emotions. Let go of it all. Even if you have insight, even if you understand everything clearly, let go of the insight. And when the mind is empty, say, who is it that lets go? Ask the question. Try to find out who it is, what it is that lets go. Bring up that not knowing state with the words, who? Who am I? Who lets go? A state of uncertainty arises. Bring this up. Allow it to be. And then there's emptiness, voidness, the state of uncertainty when the mind just goes blank. I keep stressing this right understanding, right attitude, right intention towards simplifying your life more, so that you aren't involved in unskillful and complex activities, so that you don't live heedlessly, exploiting others and having no respect for yourself or the people around you. Develop the precepts as a standard. Develop nekkhamma, renunciation of what is unskillful or unnecessary. And then mentally, let go of greed, let go of hatred, let go of delusion. This is not being averse to these conditions, it's letting go of them when you find you're attached. But when you're suffering, ask, why am I suffering? Why am I miserable? Because you're clinging to something. Find out what you're clinging to get to the source. It may be, I'm unhappy because nobody loves me. That may be true. Maybe nobody does love you. But the unhappiness comes from wanting people to love you. Even if other people do love you, you'll still have suffering if you think that they're responsible for your happiness. Someone says, you're the greatest person in the world, and you jump for joy. Someone says, you're the most horrible person I've met in my life, and you're depressed. Let go of depression. Let go of happiness. Keep the practice simple. Live your life mindfully and morally, and have faith in letting go. It's important for you to realize that we are only helpless victims of fate as long as we remain ignorant. As long as you remain ignorant, you are a helpless victim of your ignorance. All that is ignorant is born and dies. It's bound to die. It's caught in the cycle of death and rebirth. And if you die, you'll be reborn. You can count on it. And the more heedlessly you lead your life, the worse the rebirth. The Buddha taught a way to break the cycle, and that's through awareness, through seeing the cycle rather than being attached to it. When you let go of the cycle, you're no longer harmed by it. So you let go of the cycle, let go of birth and death, let go of becoming. Letting go of desire is the development of the third noble truth, which leads to the Eightfold Path. This is it's one of the essential teachings that Lumpur Sumedho would discourse on over and over again, and it's and when he said, I did nothing but that for about 2 years. Every time I tried to understand or figure things out, I'd say, let go, let go. And he really does mean that, because when he first came to practice in Thailand, he'd come out of being a graduate student in University of California in Berkeley, studying Asian history, doing a thesis on Mahatma Gandhi, and filled with the Berkeley life in the mid '60s. So his mind was absolutely jammed full of all kinds of inspired ideas and busy activities, and trying to figure it all out, and also then pitching himself into this completely new and weird situation of being a novice monk in northeast Thailand. So his mind was constantly racing around, trying to figure it all out, create a map for how the universe works, put together all of his readings on Asian religions, and also his background as a Christian, and so his mind was just busy, and so he took this simple practice of just recollecting the quality of grasping, and then encouraging himself to let go, so that for the first couple of years, when he was first of all as a novice in Nong Khai, in the town about 250 miles north of Ubon, when he was a novice for a year, and then the first couple of years at Wat Pah Pong with Ajahn Chah, he says pretty much all he did was just all day long was just let go, let go, let go, let go, let go, let go, because his habits of attachment and busyness were so strong. So he decided, because he has trained his mind to be so complicated and so active, that what he needed to do is to lean heavily in the opposite direction. And also how, as soon as he got lost in thought, then he would just become heedless of the present moment. So he really did take this as an ongoing practice, and using this as a support for mindfulness and to notice the habits of clinging. And that one of the reasons why he talks about it so emphatically here is because he saw there were such good results of it. When you hear this kind of teaching, it can also sound like it's a sort of anti-intellectualism, or that thinking is some sort of brain disease, that there's a kind of awful infection that we have to get rid of, like some kind of nastiness between our toes. But it's more the kind of ultra-simplification that he talks about is on account of the ultra-complication that he was working with. And I think it's probably similar for many of us, how our minds can get so wrapped up in thoughts and our mental creations and projections. And so that kind of simplicity, the sort of one-size-fits-all, whatever it is, let go of it. If it's a thought, let go. If it's a sight, let go. If it's a sound, let go. If it's a memory, let go. If it's a feeling in the body, let go. So that it's basically one response to every pattern of experience. And my efforts also working with the same kind of practice is that it does have a remarkably helpful effect, particularly in the early years where the mind is just so heavily, there's such a momentum of grasping. The mind is so heavily conditioned to be chasing after the next thing and creating opinions and ideas and plans, and it's like leaning into the wind. The wind is sort of blasting from the west, so you're kind of leaning into it just to stay upright. So this is a very useful approach, particularly also here we are at the beginning of the winter retreat time, and probably many of us are experiencing the hangover of having so much activity through the rest of the year and the whole Christmas, New Year period. Suddenly we put the brakes on and everything is quiet, and the momentum of the mind's activity can really charge away. But so that the inclination towards complexity and busyness can be very strong. So this very, very simple, basic approach to the practice, just let go, let go, let go, let go, let go, let go. Then that has a tremendously helpful effect. As he points out in here also, sometimes when you just say let go, the mind says, oh yeah, and the clinging carries on. And so as he mentions in that, it's not a matter of just trying to wipe out our feelings just by that sort of an act of will, but if there's something that the mind hangs on to, that it's sort of determined to keep its grip, then just being mindful of that sense of I can't let go of this one. This one's too important. This is too compelling. This is too painful or too exciting or too intense. It can't be let go of. Then to be ready to let go of that idea of letting go. Okay, well, here it is. This is what's happening, and to be bringing the attention to the felt experience of that quality of attachment, just like being out in the wind and the rain. You can't you can't just sort of switch off the feeling of the wind and the rain blasting you. The wind is coming at you. If you're outside, then you're being hit by it. You can't just let go of the impact of that feeling. The impact keeps hitting, but at least you can recognize, this is the feeling of being blasted by the wind. It's like this. This is the feeling of being in the winter storm. So that then that that letting go doesn't mean to say that necessarily the experience will vanish, or just like letting go of a pain in the body. It doesn't mean that, when you let go, boop, the discomfort disappears. But when there's that shift of attitude, even if the conditions are carrying on, even if you find yourself, still caught up in that particular pattern of feeling and attitude, that there's a spaciousness there. Just even that very knowledge of, I'm attached here and I can't let go. Just that mind which knows I'm attached and I can't let go is actually not so attached. It's not caught up in the same way, because that very knowledge of this is the feeling of attachment, that knowledge of it, that quality of awareness is in that moment is not totally caught up, it's not entangled in the same way. The comparison of the earthworm that he uses here, this was something that Ajahn Chah used to often talk about. He'd say, most people when they come to practice meditation or they want to develop their spiritual life, so most people want to be like a Buddha image, sort of sitting there all kind of serene and glorious and trying to be this sort of special, radiant, beautiful being. And he says it's far better to just be an earthworm than to try and be a Buddha. That really the more helpful thing is just to be like an earthworm, live in the dark, eat dirt, very humble needs. No one's ever going to be jealous of you. You don't have to compete with the other earthworms as to how much earth you can get. It's this very simple, quiet, and peaceful way of relating to the world. Just live in the dark and eat dirt and get on with your business. And when he would say that, people would, what do you mean be an earthworm? Because it's like a very sort of coarse or low creature. But in exactly this way, it's counteracting those feelings of I want to be special. I want to have something glorious and good, and consciously inclining to, what's wrong with being an earthworm? It's the nice, peaceful, simple, humble, quiet life. You can just carry on in this way. And maybe the last thing to follow up is where he talks about using these kind of questions. He says, when the mind is empty, say, who is it that lets go? Ask the question. Try to find out who it is, what it is that lets go. Bring up that not knowing state with the words, who? Who am I? Who lets go? So this was also a practice that Lumpur used. Probably many of you have heard him speak about this. When he was in the Peace Corps, after he finished at Berkeley and then went to Asia, he was in the first batch of people in the Peace Corps in 1963 and was in Borneo for a couple of years. And during that time, he had a friend of his who was in Hong Kong, and I guess another American Peace Corps volunteer. And he'd asked him, if you come across any Buddhist books published there in English, please send them to me. And he sent him a series of 3 books called Chan and Zen Training by a man called Charles Luke. And so that was one of the very few books that was in English that gave any instruction in Buddhist meditation in 1964. It's not the same as now, 50 years later, where you just have whole vast libraries full of Dharma literature. It wasn't that way in that time. And in one of those books, there was the Dharma talks from a Chan retreat led by the Venerable Master Shu Yun, who was the great patriarch of Buddhism in China. And this is talks from a retreat that he gave when he was 114 years old. So if you're thinking about retirement, he was 114 and still running retreats when he gave these talks. And anyway, in those talks, there was this description of using this kind of questioning as a way of focusing the mind and also breaking through doubt. And while Lumpur was a layman living in Borneo and teaching in a Chinese school there, because he was a Chinese speaker, Lumpur could speak Chinese, and was teaching in a Chinese school in Borneo, then he was using these instructions from the session led by Master Shu Yun, and it was using this particular question, who am I, as a meditation method. So this, as he says here, it's like when the mind is empty, then you ask the question, who is it that lets go? And so this kind of practice, it's not just a matter of repeating a question like, who am I, like a mantra, who am I, who am I, who am I? Like just repeating the words in a kind of rote or ritualistic way. But it depends upon a quality of spaciousness and inner quietness. And then when the mind is quiet, then very, very consciously, very actively bringing up that kind of question to ask, who is it that lets go? Who is it that's aware of this moment? Who does this mind belong to? Who is it that is the owner of this experience? And the point of that kind of questioning is not to get some kind of clever verbal, or even a stupid verbal answer. It's not there isn't a right or a wrong answer in terms of a concept. It's not like the people who publish these books of answers to Zen koans. There isn't a correct answer in terms of concepts. But what is being done is that in asking that kind of question, then it challenges the habits of self-view. It challenges the habit of thinking there's a me, a separate individual doer who's here, who's acting, and that's what's going on. Because when the question who or what is asked in the silence of the mind, then what becomes apparent very quickly is that who is a ridiculous question. Because there's something in the heart that recognizes, well, it's not really a who. It's not really a person. The word who sounds sort of weird or out of place, or doesn't really apply. And it's that very weirdness, that sense of, that doesn't really make sense. That in the heart which knows this isn't really a person. This is not that's not the fundamental reality of things. It's awakening that insight, that intuition. And as he doesn't describe the practice in detail here, probably in some of the later talks he does. He simply says, a state of uncertainty arises. Bring this up, allow it to be. And then there is emptiness, voidness, the state of uncertainty when the mind just goes blank. So it's not just a sort of a worshipping of blankness, but what is the mechanism of this kind of process is that when that sort of question is asked and is posed in a very direct and clear way, in that moment the usual self-creating habits fall apart. Before the thinking mind jumps in and says, "Well, I am Ajahn Amaro, that's who I am." Or, I am the wisdom mind. That's what I am. That before there's a conceptual or verbal answer that comes in, there's a kind of spaciousness. In a way, the thinking mind trips over its own feet, and in that moment where there's when the question has been asked, and the usual bubble of self-view has been popped before a new bubble of self-view can form, there's the quality of spaciousness, of brightness, and no sense of self. And so there's a kind of a gap in the flow of self-creation. So what you do with this kind of practice is then you keep your attention on that gap, on that quality of spaciousness, and then after a moment or two, usually a whole flow of different thoughts come in and say, well, I am this, or I am that. And then after that has the mind goes quiet again, then you simply bring the question up once more, so that you're continually opening up that spaciousness, opening up that gap, and just allowing the mind to know its own nature, and it's free of self-view. So that is not just a kind of a random kind of thinking, but it's a particular kind of thinking that you use in a way to get perspective and to interrupt the habitual flow of our thoughts and particularly the habits of self-view, creating this idea of a separate, independent entity who's the doer, the experiencer, and the actor. So if anyone has any questions or things we'd like to clarify, then please speak up. Don't be shy. Yes?
I think I know what you're going to say, Jess, but I'll ask anyway. When you feel like your meditation is an absolute mess and you're thinking all sorts of things, you don't even know that you're thinking it, just feels like, well, this is happening, you're half in a dream. You can still let go of even being able to meditate.
Sure, yes.
Letting it get even more of a mess.
In a way, that sense of being able to observe, well, this is a total mess. that which knows it's a total mess is actually not a mess. So that's why one of the reasons in the Satipatthana Sutta, there's the third section of it, which is called Cittanupassana, the contemplation of mind or moods. There's this whole sequence, I think it's about 16 pairs of moods, when the Buddha says, knowing the angry mind is angry, knowing the mind free of anger is free of anger, knowing the expanded mind is expanded and the contracted mind is contracted, knowing the agitated mind is agitated, the mind free of agitation as being free of agitation. And in that, he doesn't make any kind of value judgment about whether anger is better than no anger, or agitation is worse than no agitation. It's just that knowing that those qualities as being present. So just to be able to recognize, well, this is a total mess. And that in a way, not trying to fix it, just relaxing the attitude towards it, then it's just like, in a way, like being blasted by the wind and the rain. It's like, well, this is a strong one. You're just experiencing this blast of conditions, but you don't have to fight against it, or you don't have to cave in, but just knowing, oh, this is what this sort of chaotic mess feels like. Because what we're doing in the practice, in many ways, is we're receiving the effects of past karma or past actions or attitudes. So what's been caused in the past, we experience in the present. And then, so that's part one. And part two is the way that we handle that then conditions what will arise in the future. So if we meet the chaos that's been caused from past action and past attitudes, past events, if we meet that with an openness and an equanimity, then that openness and equanimity, that clarity, then sows the seeds for those qualities to be strengthened in the future. If we meet it with struggle and resistance and self-hatred and contention, then those are the seeds that we're sowing in the present, and they will ripen in the future. So that in each moment, that's what we're doing. And this two-part process is happening all the time. How we receive the effects of past actions, and how we relate to that, then creates the causes for future experience.
So in some ways, it's contentment, even whatever the conditions of the mind are.
Yes, yeah.
You're going, oh, this is a mess, but that's okay.
Exactly, yeah. That the next talk in the one is called, in this collection, is called Listening to the Mind. So we'll get onto that tomorrow. But it's very much that. It's not you're not praising or condoning the chaotic stuff in the mind. Also, you're not just being passive. Or just like switching off and going, oh, it's just my mind, and just becoming sort of numb and sort of in a subtly, or not so subtly, kind of negative, kind of capitulating way, like just a sense of being a victim, making yourself into a victim. It's not that. It's just there's a quality of openness and patience, of yes, you're receiving all of that, but you're not fighting against it, but you're also not just letting the mind be just drop into a kind of sullen, numb, half switched off, half resentful mixture. But rather, there's as much of a quality of clarity that can be mustered, even though there's a kind of confusing or a chaotic array of perceptions arising.
Ajahn Amaro, I have one question. When we ask who I am, we are assuming there is I, I am something, or I am someone. So we build, that's it, because we can do this question, is because we build before this I.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Why we asking something that we know already?
Well, in a way, the reason you ask the question is because you know that construction of I and me and mine is not something to be trusted. It's not something that's solid. And even though as a theory we know, all dhammas are not self, still we might know that as a theory or as an idea, but moment to moment, then we are still thrown around. We're still disturbed by the effects of attachment to I and me and mine. So we might know the idea of anatta, but we don't know the actuality of it. Does that make sense? So then we ask the question, when we say, who am I? To see how ridiculous that word I is. Because in the normal flow of the day, then we take it to be something real, like I'm in charge of this, or I'm cooking, or I asked you to do that, how come you didn't do it? Don't say that to me. Or like, well, if you ask me, what I think is, we use those I and me and this is mine all the time. And so that if we are extremely clear-minded, and there's really no confusion, then we know that every time we use the word I or me or mine, it's what we call a convenient fiction. We know it's not really any separate independent me here. But if we're not totally clear all the time, then when somebody's walked off in our shoes, hey, where are my shoes? Or someone says, this tastes awful, did you cook this? Then, what do you mean? You know that okay, there's still some attachment there. So that we use the questioning to uncover those habits of attachment where there's still that investment in I and me and mine. Does that make sense?
Yes. Can be a good definition of I, the relation between the condition and the mind?
Well, the I is like a psychological structure that has evolved. The ego, the feeling of I. I mean, ego. The word Freud invented the word. He got it from the Latin, which just means I am. Ego means I am in Latin, and so Freud just took that Latin word and used it as a way of representing that I feeling. That's why we use the term. And so that ego developed over many millennia of human development in order to help us live together as a human group, so that we live in a society or a tribal group or a family group. And so it's a psychological structure that grew up that has a particular purpose, like our hands or our feet or our language. It's kind of a useful thing. It has its purpose. But like any other kind of structure, like our hands or our feet or our tongue, our language, it can even though it's got a useful purpose, we can take it to be more important and more solid and more real than it really is. So that's where the trouble begins, where we take the I feeling to be an absolute reality. And so that when we are practicing meditation, and particularly insight meditation, the vipassana, what we're doing is, in a sense, helping the habits of identifying where the mind creates the feelings of I and me and mine. We're helping those to be let go of. So there's a clarifying of the quality of knowing. There is awareness that is not an illusion. That is how we know this moment. There is the quality of knowing, of awareness, but it's that when that awareness is grasped and turned into an I. I am feeling, I am seeing, I am hearing, I am speaking, I am. That's where the cause of alienation and difficulty and suffering begins, because of that identification and attachment to awareness. So that with vipassana meditation, where the point is to let go of those habits of attachment and identification, so then the awareness functions without being turned into an I or a me or a mine, without having that kind of stuck on to the outside of it. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Only one observation about so without condition we cannot have identity. The I appear with the conditions.
Without conditions.
Without condition you have identity.
Well, without conditions you wouldn't have anything.
So what is a mind? Unconditioned mind don't have identity. It's nothing. Well, what is a unconditioned?
Well, the unconditioned, you could say it's no thing. It's not a thing. Yeah, not a thing. So, but that which is real but which is not a thing, the thinking mind can't conceive that, because our thoughts only work with the realm of things. Like the world of concepts and words, they relate to the world of things. So it's very difficult to talk about what is completely real but is not a thing. The words and the concepts, they fall over. They can't do the job. And so that's one of the reasons why the Buddha, rather than trying to emphasize the unconditioned or ultimate reality, or trying to come up with words to describe that, his method was to point our attention to all of the things that cause obstruction to that. So rather than trying to describe the Dhamma in very colourful or intricate detail, he pointed to all the things that cause the Dhamma to be obscured and to be, unrealized. So that with our efforts to then recognize those obstacles and then to let go of them, then the reality speaks for itself. You don't have to have a word or a concept to describe it. The words he does use are very straightforward or very simple, like apparent here and now, timeless, encouraging investigation, like we chant each day. They don't give you much to get a grip on. Apparent here and now. Well, what is apparent here and now?
The problem is this is or material or conceptual. I cannot see another thing.
Yeah.
So the other thing.
So that's why the Dhamma can't be conceptualized or can't be conceived, but it can be realized. It can be known directly. And so that as long as the thinking mind is trying to create an image of it, it's then all we can say is, it's like space, or it's like light. But you can't accurately put a form or a concept. So that the whole approach of the Buddha, certainly in the southern Buddhist world, is rather than trying to create a description of Dhamma, is pointing out the way to realize it. Rather than, trying to define what the self is, he says, well, just let go of what you're not, and then what's real will become apparent. So that's why we recite, the body is not self, feelings are not self, perceptions are not self, mental formations are not self, consciousness is not self. So in letting go of what you're not, then rather than trying to create the perfect idea of what I am, the Buddha avoided that altogether. So just let go of what you're not, let go of the habits of identification, and then what is real becomes apparent.
When you speak about experiment, you speak about emotion and feelings in experiments?
In experiments?
Yeah, when you experiment one reality or one experiment through the meditation. Experience.
You mean experience?
Experience, yes, sorry. It's not experiment. Sorry, it's my English.
Well, it's experimenting kind of applies as well,
Experience, yeah.
So what was the
you
question?
Think about the feelings and emotions. Is the way that we experience?
Well, it's a feeling or emotion, also perceptions, memory, all the different patterns of experience. They can take shape as a thought, as a sensation, as a mood, as a mental image, as a sound. It's the different patterns of conditions that whatever is felt like, just like in this moment. There's seeing, hearing, feeling. It's that this is what is being experienced. It's a mixture of different influences coming together and being known. So that the practice of Dhamma is from recollecting that all of these patterns of experience, coarse and fine, in what we call inside, like a thought, or outside, like a visual object, that these are all just taking shape. They're all patterns of experience taking shape in the mind. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose, tongue, body, mind consciousness, arising, taking shape, and dissolving.
Thank you.
Okay? Yes?
I feel a little bit confused. From one side, the Ajahn said encouraging investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And from another side, I'm trying to tell myself, let go. And it's to find, how can I find the balance between digging in some idea or some thought or some feeling that arises over and over again, and from the other side, not afraid that I'm bury things, hide things, and just how to find the balance, if there is an answer.
Well, you have to experiment. So, Ajahn Chah, the rule of thumb that Ajahn Chah used to encourage, he said, if in meditation something comes up and you let it go, and the same thing comes up 3 times over, then rather than trying to let go of it and dispel it, then pick it up and take a look at it, and ask yourself, well, where is this coming from, or why is this so interesting, or why does the mind keep going to this particular memory, or this feeling, or this worry? So that was his just a rough idea. Okay, if it comes up 3 times, and rather than putting it aside, you bring it to the center and take a look. But also you have to, in a way, experiment. See, when you start to investigate something, or you look, okay, well, how is this working, or where does this come from? If you find that you're getting totally obsessed, your teeth are clenched and your kind of knuckles are white. Okay, we're a bit uptight here. We're getting just to look and see how intense things are getting, or if the mind is getting obsessed or carried away. And then, in looking at it and feeling it out, okay, well, things are getting too intense or too stressed here. Okay, lighten up, relax. Just bring your attention to the body, let the whole system relax, go to the breath, and let everything calm down. And then, once this whole system is settled and is a bit more peaceful, say, okay, now do I want to go back and look at that thing again, or do I want to take a different approach? So, in the process of the practice, you always have to keep an eye on what are the effects of the way that we're working with the mind. So this is called vimamsa. Vimamsa is like the reviewing. So once you're following a particular track or a method of practice or investigation, or you've been following a particular track for a while, then vimamsa is to sort of look up and say, okay, now, where am I? What are the road signs saying? Well, I thought I was driving to London, but that sign says Liverpool. Maybe I took a wrong turn somewhere. I thought I was driving for a long time. London's only supposed to be an hour away, and the signs are saying Liverpool. So that tells me I've taken a wrong turn. I'm going in the wrong direction. So, in exactly the same way, that reviewing is a sense of looking up and checking the signs and, okay, well, how am I handling this? Am I making myself more stressed? Am I developing more of a sense of understanding? Do I feel more at peace with things? Is my mind alert, or is it going really sleepy and dull? What's happening? What's the effect? So there's that kind of exploring and looking to see what the effects are. And then adjusting the way that you're working according to that sort of checking. There's no sort of formula. They haven't invented the kind of sort of Google Glass for our mind. Like, okay, you get a review. Okay, now you need a couple more units of samadhi and a little bit of extra metta. Okay, very good. Okay, hold steady. Now we're getting a bit too uptight here, so we need a bit of physical relaxation. Go down a couple of notches with the energy level. We don't get that kind of little sort of readout on our internal screen. We have to measure those things for ourselves, and then that kind of measuring and exploring, then we learn how to adjust to relax, calm down, or to sort of sharpen the attention to see what's needed in each moment. Okay.